Welcome back, everyone. We are continuing with Macbeth, Act 4. We read Scene 1 and 2, and as you might recall, in Scene 1, Macbeth is looking to visit the Weird Women to learn more about his destiny, right? He wants to make sure that his position of power is secure, and little does he know that the witches have previously met and are planning to confuse him. That is, make him feel incredibly confident and secure in his position of power. But they're going to also remain ambiguous and equivocate, to him, right? So they conjure these three, really four, if you consider the last apparition. They consider these conjure these apparitions, and um, send Macbeth away, feeling secure. However, Macbeth is upset that Macduff never showed up to his banquet, and that he's called on him, and Macduff seems to be insolent. And so he is hiring murderers now to go to Macduff's family and basically have them murdered. And that is what we see in scene 2. Um, Now, in scene 3, we are over in England. Okay, so this is the Scottish play. Most of the play takes place in Scotland. However, this scene, we are going to be seeing an exchange take place between Malcolm and Macduff in England, where Malcolm is staying. Okay, so I just want to also kind of go over the atmosphere of Scotland at this moment in time. Okay, so remember a couple of scenes ago, we saw a conversation that was had between Ross and I think an older man, and they were talking about how they were sarcastic. Actually, I think it was Lennox, right? And they were being very sarcastic about how men must not walk late at night. Okay. So most of Scotland, I would say, pretty much is suspicious of Macbeth, and I think not really truly loyal to him. Okay, there is suspect that he is not the rightful king. Okay, and so Macbeth is now going to be ruling like a tyrant. Okay, so people are living in fear. It's very much like a communist type society, right? And so, without further ado, I would like to begin scene 3, which is a kind of a longer scene between Malcolm and Macduff. So please bear with me. It is a little bit of a tougher scene as well, but I'm going to do my best. Malcolm, who is King Duncan's eldest son and the rightful king, says to Macduff, "Let us seek out some desolate shade, and there weep our sad bosoms empty. Let us rather hold fast the mortal sword, and, like good men, bestride our downfall and birthdom. Each new morn, new widows howl, new orphans cry, new sorrows strike heaven on the face, that it resounds as if it felt with Scotland and yelled out like a syllable of dollar." So you'll notice that Malcolm is saying, let's seek out some shade, okay, and weep our sad bosoms empty. Okay, he is saying let's take a seat and just cry over everything that has become of Scotland. And Macduff is urging him, let us rather instead, right, hold fast to the mortal sword. Okay, here when we say the mortal sword, we're talking about the deadly sword, right? Okay, and fight for our country. Okay, because there is a need to do that with Macbeth as king. Malcolm says, "What I believe I'll wail, what no believe, and what I can redress as I shall find the time to, friend, I will. What you have spoke, it may be so, perchance. This tyrant, whose sole name blisters our tongues, was once thought honest. You have loved him well. He hath not touched you yet. I am young, but something you may deserve of him through me, and wisdom to offer up a weak, poor, innocent lamb to appease an angry God." Okay, so a couple important lines here, right? So, you have loved him well, he hath not touched you yet. This is important. Malcolm is hesitant about Macduff's arrival, right? Which if you put yourself in his shoes, is probably very, wise of him. Macduff could be working for Macbeth, right? And so here he says, "You've loved Macbeth well. He hath not touched you yet." You and I, the audience, know that that is not true because Macduff's family is brutally murdered. So maybe Macduff does not yet know it, but we as an audience know it. So there's some dramatic irony happening here. Then he continues and he says, "I am naive, right? I am young and inexperienced. But something you may deserve of him through me in wisdom to offer up a poor innocent lamb to appease an angry God." Well, let's think about it for a second, okay? He may be naive, but Macbeth could benefit from Macduff betraying Malcolm, right? He could offer up the poor innocent lamb. Well, in this particular instance, who would be the poor innocent lamb? Would it be Macbeth? Would it be Macduff? It would be Malcolm, right? And the angry god would be Macbeth, okay? So Malcolm is saying, hey, listen, you might betray me to satisfy Macbeth. I am not treacherous. Macduff, is maybe a little bit offended by this accusation or this reservation that Malcolm seems to have. But Macbeth is, Malcolm says, right? You might not be treacherous, but Macbeth is. And a good and virtuous nature may recoil in an imperial charge, but I shall crave your pardon. That which you are, my thoughts cannot transpose. Angels are bright still, though the brightest fell. Though all things foul would wear the brows of grace, yet grace must still look so. Yet grace must still look so. Okay, here he's talking about how things don't always look as they seem, right? So, yes, good may look good, but bad might look bad as well. Okay, I have lost my hopes. So, Macduff is getting frustrated with the fact that Malcolm doesn't trust him and isn't seemingly wanting to help him. Malcolm then says, "Perchance, in other words, perhaps, even there where I did find my doubts, why in the rawness left you wife and child, those precious motives, those strong knots of love, without leave taking? I pray you, let not my jealousies be your dishonors, but mine own safeties. You may be rightly just, whatever I shall think." Okay. Another reason that Malcolm is suspicious of Macduff is because he left his family. Why left you wife and child, he says, okay, without without leave taking, okay? So he is suspicious of this fact because that was a very vulnerable and dangerous move for him. Macduff is now crying out, "Bleed, bleed, poor country." What country is he talking about here? Is he talking about England? No, he's mourning Scotland. "Bleed, bleed, poor country," he whines and wails. "Great tyranny, lay thou thy basest shore, for goodness dare not check thee. Wear thou thy wrongs. The title is afeard. Fare thee well, Lord. I would not be the villain that thou thinkest for the whole space that's in the tyrant's grasp, and the rich east to boot." Okay, so Macduff is excusing himself, right? "Fare thee well, Lord." Okay, he's being a little bit sarcastic here because he's offended that Malcolm doesn't trust him. Malcolm says, "Be not offended. I speak not as an absolute fear of you. I think our country sinks beneath the yoke. It weeps, it bleeds, and each new day a gash is added to her wounds." Obviously, we're talking once again about our country, which is being personified. It doesn't literally weep. It's not literally bleeding, or maybe it is because Macbeth is apparently killing everybody, right? But it is in distress and it needs help, right? It needs bandages, so to speak. "I think withal there would be hands uplifted in my right, and here from gracious England have I offer of the goodly thousands. But For all of this, when I shall tread upon the tyrant's head, or wear it on my sword, yet my poor country shall have more vices than it had before, more suffer and more sundry ways than ever, by him that shall succeed. Okay, like I said, guys, I know that this video is probably not the most engaging, and I know that this scene is very, very challenging, okay? So you're going to have to just continue to bear with me. Malcolm is saying, okay, but for all of this, right, when I shall tread upon the tyrant's head, he's saying that I have an army and that I can defeat him. Okay? Yet my poor country shall have more vices than it had before, more suffer in more sundry ways than ever by him that shall succeed. In other words, he's self deprecating. He's putting himself down, saying that he cannot rule Scotland because it's going to suffer even more under his rule than it does under Macbeth's. Perhaps he feels he's not fit to be king. That reminded me of The Lion King. Anyway, Macduff says, what should he be? It is myself, I mean, in whom I know all the particulars of vice. Vice is like your flaws, right? So I know all of my flaws, and they're so grafted that when they shall be opened, black Macbeth will seem as pure as snow, and the poor state esteem him as a lamb, being compared with my confineless harms. Okay, so Malcolm is saying that compare to Macbeth, right? I'll make Macbeth seem as pure as snow. So that's a simile. Okay, now I don't know that anybody could be a worse leader than Macbeth is, right? So I want you to think about why Malcolm might be throwing himself under the bus to Macduff here. All right, he has already offended Macduff in telling him that he doesn't necessarily trust him. All right. And so why might he now be saying to Macduff, hey, listen, I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be a good king. Macduff responds to this self-deprecation that's coming from Malcolm by saying, not in the legions of horrid hell can come a devil more damned in the evils to top Macbeth. I grant him bloody, luxurious, avaricious, right? Which means what? What does avaricious mean? It means greedy. You guys know that. False, deceitful, sudden, malicious, smacking of every sin that has a name, but there's no bottom, none of my voluptuousness. Okay? So, yeah, sure, Macbeth is bloody and luxurious and avaricious, and he's all of these things, but there's no bottom to my voluptuousness. So voluptuousness, I think immediately of Beyonce, right? You know, very curvy and sexual and sensual. And so here he's saying that he is um, lusty. Okay, your wives, your daughters, your matrons, and your maids could not fill up this cistern of my lust and my desire. All continent, continent impediments would overbear that did oppose my will. Better Macbeth than such an one to reign. Boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny. So interesting here. Boundless intemperance. Okay, intemperance is a lack of restraint. So he's saying, sure, boundless, intemperance is a nature. In nature is a tyranny. Yeah, sure, that's a flaw. It hath been the untimely emptying of the happy throne and the fall of many kings. So many kings have been subject to this flaw that you're claiming to have. But fear not yet to take upon you what is yours. So Macduff is telling him, but don't be afraid to take upon your head, right, the crown, because it's rightfully yours. You may convey your pleasures in a spacious plenty, and yet seem cold. The time you may so hoodwink. We have willing dames enough. There cannot be that vulture in you to devour so many as will to greatness dedicate themselves, finding it so inclined. And Macduff is like, oh, come on, there's plenty of women for you. All right. I don't know that the feminists would necessarily like that part there, but he said, we can find you plenty of women to satisfy your issue here. Malcolm responds by saying, with this there grows in my most ill-composed affection such a staunchless avarice that, were I king, I should cut off the nobles for their lands, desire his jewels and this other's house, and my more having would be as a sauce to make me more hungry, that I should forge quarrels unjust against the good and loyal, destroying them for wealth. So he continues to try to convince Macduff all of the other reasons why he should not be king. Okay, he says that he's greedy and that he would cut off the land for all of these noble people and that he would do all of these unjust things to the people that he would rule. Macduff responds, this avarice sticks deep, grows with more pernicious root, pernicious meaning harmful. Yeah, so it grows with harmful root than summer seeming lust, and it hath been the sword of our slain kings. Yet do I fear Scotland has poisons to fill up your will of your mere own. All of these are portable with other graces weighed. Okay, so all of your other, he's talking about his vices. So he says all of your graces outweigh those vices. Malcolm says, but I have none. The king becoming graces as justice, verity, temperance, stableness, bounty, perseverance, mercy, lowliness, devotion, patience, courage, fortitude. I have no relish of them, but abound in the division of each several crime, acting in it many ways. Nay, had I power, I should pour the sweet milk of concord into hell, uproar the universal peace, confound all unity on earth. Okay, so he continues to, as I'm going to just say here, self-deprecate, right? I don't have any of the good graces that a king is supposed to have, all right? And here, Macduff, and I wish I could show you the movie here because I love the way the actor, yes, these lines seem short, but it's in the delivery that we see in the movie, but really what we would be seeing on stage if we were to be seeing this in the proper medium. The actor playing Macduff breaks down. He weeps for Scotland. Oh, Scotland, Scotland, right? He's basically like, we're screwed, okay? But obviously, this is much more dramatic, okay? I'm not necessarily doing a great job at conveying the emotion behind the actor who would be delivering the lines. Malcolm says, if such a one be fit to govern, speak. I am as I have spoken. Fit to govern? No, not fit to live. O nation miserable, with an untitled tyrant bloodied sceptre, when shalt thou see thy wholesome days again, since that the truest issue of thy throne by his own interdiction stands accursed and does blaspheme his breed? Thy royal father was a most sainted king. The queen that bore thee, oftener upon her knees than on her feet, died every day she lived. Fare thee well. These evils thou repeatest upon thyself have banished me from Scotland. O my breast, thy hope ends here. All right, so I tried to convey his absolute lack of patience with Malcolm here. He even brings up his parents, right? Your father was the most sainted king, and your queen, she was praying more than she was even on her feet. They were such noble folk. And he is absolutely appalled that Malcolm would be putting himself down by, here and not accepting the throne. But again, I want to pose the question, okay? Appearance versus reality. He appears in this moment to not be willing to take on the throne. But I want you to question whether or not that is actually true. Why might Malcolm be so hesitant to open up to Macduff and tell him what's truly happening? And the easy answer to that is that he doesn't trust him. It's hard to trust anybody in this type of society. Malcolm responds, okay, to this noble passion, which he will now call it, in a very inspiring way. And again, I wish I could show you the film here because this is awesome. Malcolm says, Macduff, This noble passion, child of integrity, hath from my soul wiped the black scruples, recoiled my thoughts to thy good truth and honor. Devilish Macbeth by many of these trains hath sought to win me into his power, and modest wisdom plucks me from over credulous haste. By God above, deal between thee and me, for even now I put myself to thy direction and unspeak mine own detraction. Here abjure the taints and blames I laid upon myself, for strangers to my nature. I am yet unknown to woman, never was forsworn, scarcely have coveted what was mine own, at no time broke my faith, would not betray the devil to his fellow, and delight no less in truth than life. My first false speaking was this upon myself: what I am truly is thine and my poor country's to command, whither indeed, before thy here approach, old Seward is the general of the English army, old Seward with 10,000 warlike men already at a point, was setting forth. Now will together, and the chance of goodness be like our warranted quarrel. Why are you silent? All right, a little bit of a longer monologue here, and I'm going to go back and kind of paraphrase this for you, okay? He is excited at the fact that Macduff just lost it on him for not accepting the position. That was his test to see whether or not Macduff was loyal to him, or was he being loyal to Macbeth, right? Again, these times, it's hard to tell who's on whose team. All right. And so he even goes on to say here that he detracts, right? Okay, so he detracts and abjures all the taints and blames that he laid upon himself. He takes them back after having said before that he was too voluptuous and would sleep with all of these women and these wives and these daughters, and it would be terrible. Now he says, guess what? I am yet unknown to woman. In other words, I'm a virgin. Okay? Never was forsworn. He never lied. Scarcely have coveted was what was mine, right? So he never really was greedy about anything that he didn't already possess. Okay, he never broke my faith. He goes on to even say, my first false speaking was this upon myself. Never has he lied up until this very point. All right. Now, Macduff is listening to Malcolm, who is probably delivering these lines excitedly, fastly, energetically, fervently. Okay. And then he's seeing Macduff just stare at him and he's like, why are you silent? Speak. Macduff says, such welcome and unwelcome things at once, 'tis hard to recoil. Okay, so Macduff is trying to take this all in and doesn't necessarily know how to react at this point. Okay, and then in the midst of their conversation, this doctor appears. Okay, he comes in and Malcolm says, well, more anon. Okay. Comes the king forth, I pray you? Ay, sir, there are a crew of wretched souls that stay his cure. Their malady convinces the great essay of art, but at his touch, such sanctity hath heaven given his hand, they presently amend. Okay, so this is not incredibly important here, but if you think back to that background information that I had given you prior to starting Macbeth, months ago because of this coronavirus pandemic, you might have remembered that at the time they believed a king could heal, right? With just his touch, okay? And so here they're talking about how King Edward could heal with just his touch, okay? Malcolm says, I thank you, doctor. The doctor exits. It seems a little bit irrelevant, but remember, this play was written for King James I of Scotland. Shakespeare was trying to flatter him, and so he is talking about the king's powers here. Macduff says, what's the disease he means? 'Tis called the evil, a most miraculous work in this good king, which often since my here remain in England I have seen him do. How he solicits heaven himself best knows, but strangely visited people all swollen and ulcerous, pitiful to the eye, The mere despair of surgery he cures, hanging a golden stamp about their necks. Put on with holy prayers, and 'tis spoken to the succeeding royalty he leaves the healing benediction. With this strange virtue he hath a heavenly gift of prophecy, and sundry blessings hang about his throne, to speak him full of grace. All right, again, talking about King Edward and all of the powers that he possesses in the ability to heal some of the people of England. Now Ross is entering. Okay, now Ross had when was the last time we saw Ross? All right, so if we were doing a puzzle, I would stop it here and see if you can remember, but we're not. So when was the last time we saw Ross? Ross was talking to Lady Macbeth, trying to appease her, right? She was very angry at her husband for having left her so suddenly, and now Ross is showing up here in England, okay? See who comes here, my country, my countrymen, but yet I know him not. Okay, again, Malcolm is hesitant. Okay, he recognizes Ross, but he says, yet I know him not. He knows that it's a guy from Scotland, but he doesn't necessarily know him. Macduff says, my ever gentle cousin, welcome hither. Malcolm, I know him now. Good God, betimes remove the means that makes us strangers. Sir, amen. Macduff says, stands Scotland where it did? Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself. It cannot be called our mother, but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing is once seen to see smile. Where sighs and groans and shrieks that rent the air are made, not marked. Where violent sorrows seem a modern ecstasy. The dead man's knell is there scarce asked for who, and good men lives expire before the flower in their caps, dying or ere they stricken. Again, talking about the state of Scotland and how it's pretty miserable. Like oh, relation too nice and yet too true. What's the newest grief? That of an hour's age doth hiss the speaker. Each minute teems a new one. How does my wife? Macduff asks. Why, well. And my children? Well, too. The tyrant has not battered at their peace. No, they were well at peace when I did leave them. Okay, now presumably Ross knows a little more than he's letting on here. Okay, let's see what other news he wants to deliver to Macduff. Be not a niggard of your speech. How goes it? When I came hither to transport the tidings which I have heavily borne, there ran a rumour of many worthy fellows that were out, which was to my belief witnessed the rather for that I saw the tyrant's power afoot. Now is the time of help. Your eye in Scotland would create soldiers, make our women fight to doff their dire distresses. Ross is bringing news, okay, that now is the time to show your face in Scotland and to fight for Scotland. Okay, little does he know, Malcolm already has a plan. Be it their comfort, Malcolm says, we are coming thither. Malcolm tells him, we are coming. Gracious England, in other words, King Edward, hath lent us good Seward, who is the English army general, 10,000 warlike men, right? 10,000 men. An older and a better soldier none that Christendom gives out. Would I could answer this comfort with the like, but I have words that would be howled out in the desert air, where hearing should not latch them. Okay, so now Ross changes the subject. He's happy to hear this news that Malcolm has already gotten 10,000 English soldiers to prepare to fight Macbeth, okay? But he doesn't have good news to deliver to him. Macduff says, what concern they? The general cause, or it is a fee grief due to some single breast? No mind that's honest, but in it shares some woe, though the main part pertains to you alone. So what news do you think Ross is about to deliver to Macduff? And now that you know probably what news he is going to deliver to Macduff. I want you to imagine how Macduff might react. Okay? How might Macduff react? Macduff then says, if it be mine, if this bad news is partially mine, then keep it not from me. Quickly, let me have it. Let not your ears despise my tongue forever, which shall possess them with the heaviest sound that ever yet they heard. I guess at it. Your castle is surprised, your wife and babes savagely slaughtered, to relate the manner whereon the quarry of these murdered deer to add the death of you. Merciful heaven. So Malcolm is listening to this and, starting to, you know, mourn with Macduff, essentially. What, man, never pull your hat upon your brows, give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers the overfraught heart and bids it break. He's begging Macduff to speak. My children, too? Again, I'm not doing this justice. We would see the actor's grief in his delivery of the words here. Perhaps his body language would start to break down because he's just learning that his family's been brutally slaughtered. Wife, children, servants, all that could be found. And I must be from thence. My wife killed too, I have said. Be comforted. Malcolm is trying to give Macduff some advice here. Be comforted. Let's make us medicines of great revenge to cure this deadly grief. Okay, Malcolm is saying, let's get revenge on this, okay? Don't get too upset here. Macduff, he has no children. All my pretty ones? Did you say all? Oh, hell kite. All? What, all my pretty little chickens and their dam at one fell swoop? Dispute it like a man, and I shall do so, but I must first also feel it like a man. I cannot but remember such things were most precious to me. Did heaven look on and would not take their part? Sinful Macduff, they were all struck for thee. Not that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine. Fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rest them now. He's speaking in third person here, right? But he's upset with himself because his family was killed not for their own demerits, but for his, right? It's his fault. Malcolm, be this the whetstone of your sword. The whetstone of your sword, I want you to think back to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, right? Remember when the big Green Knight was sharpening his sword? He was sharpening it on a whetstone. So Malcolm is telling him here metaphorically, right? Let's sharpen this. Be this the whetstone of your sword. Let this moment fuel your revenge. Let grief convert to anger. Blunt not the heart, enrage it. Macduff now says, oh, I could play the woman with mine eyes and braggart with my tongue, but gentle heavens cut short all intermission. Front to front bring thou this fiend of Scotland and myself. Within my sword's length set him. If he scape, heaven forgive him too. This tune goes manly, Malcolm says. He's happy to hear this. This tune, this utterance that he has just said is manly. Come, go we to the king. Our power is ready. Our lack is nothing but our leave. Macbeth is ripe for shaking, and the powers above put on their instruments. Receive what cheer you may. The night is long and never finds the day. All right, and so at this, they are all, it's a very powerful ending of the falling action. Remember, Act 4 is the falling action. And so now there's revenge in all of their hearts. And so in the final act, Act 5, we will get to the resolution. All right, I'm sorry this was a long one, but it's a difficult scene to read on your own. So I hope you guys are finding these videos helpful.